Welcome back. I would consider this the most exciting part of the forum. All parts are exciting, but this is usually the most exciting because what we want is to hear in a dialogue, and hopefully you will ask questions as well, and to interact with some of the speakers and presenters, but also people we have invited. Someone is joining us online, but I'll introduce you, and as I introduce you to the stage, please come up and please take your seat. The first person will be Ajahn Gomesh. Ajahn Gomesh, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome back, and this person we saw on video. In fact, we saw them both on video and with the only live presenter, but Ajahn Gomesh on video, but also this person on video, Gardika Gigih. Where were you? I saw you. Owa Jawa, the sounds of gibbons. Actually, it's appropriate for Gardika to come up because this is a moment of listening, but also of speaking. But, the third person is someone live, Debbie. Debbie.
Hello.
That's it, right? And then online, Farah? Do we have one more? Am I missing?
Hello.
Oh, Zikri Rahman. Sorry, I missed you out. This is what happens when you're finishing your tea outside the door. Zikri Rahman, ladies and gentlemen, from Malaysia. Okay, and then we have someone who's online, and that is Farah Wardhani. She's going to join us online. Hi, Farah. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Bridget.
Thank you. Okay, so and that's just me taking my seat here. So the question for today's dialogue is, how can recorded art forms and performance from print to digital technologies inspire critical discourse? So it's quite an obvious question, but what we want, of course, is a very personal perspective from the different artists. So actually, I want to start with Farah, because Farah is the executive director was the executive director of the 2021 Jakarta Biennale, and for me, more compellingly, she served as director of the Indonesian Visual Art Archive, or IVA, in Jogja from 2006 to 2015, and I used that when I was doing my research. And I have a question for Farah to kick off the dialogue, because we were at a meeting upstairs and we were talking a little bit about language. So maybe I can provoke Farah with this, with the example of someone like Sanento Yuliman. Yeah, whose works, his seminal works, he was I would call him a critical art historian. And his seminal works are not exactly available in English. And perhaps we could talk a little bit about, or perhaps you could give a perspective on how access or non-access to that kind of archival material impacts the way the art history of Indonesia, in this case, for example, would be regarded by an English-speaking reality. Farah, do you have some comment about that?
Yeah, thank you, Bridget. I think it's a very important question and a very important topic. Actually, rarely talked about how our historiography has been constructed, and how, let's say, archive of our thinkers or important thinkers, are canonized in a way. Like Sanento, for example, is if everybody who hasn't known Sanento, he was an artist. He's part of the founder, or the main one of the main, aside from Pak Jim Supangkat, he was one of the main initiator of the Gerakan Seni Rupa Baru, the Indonesian New Art Movement, and then that was kind of like the turning point where our modern art history, in a way that kind of like shaped up the trajectory of our art practice, leading to the contemporary art, the contemporary art practice that we all probably familiar now with the Indonesian contemporary art practice now. And Sanento was, if I could say, Pak Jim was more like the curator, while Sanento's ideas and thoughts were the foundation of the Gerakan Seni Rupa Baru, or the Indonesian New Art Movement. So in terms of internally, in our, like in the art, people who already, in the art circle niche, we all refer to Samento. But yes, one interesting thing is that, yes, not most of his literary works are in Bahasa, and he did his PhD in Sorbonne in France. So that's also kind of like was the challenge was that so none of his materials were in English, while his thesis, which was actually a very prominent seminal work as well, was in French. So I would just to share a bit was that we at EVA, I think like around 2010, we tried to work with the family also, try to fundraise to translate his thesis into English. But then again, and actually contribute also to digitize the thesis. So to make it available for research. The thesis was in print and was kept by the family, and then we tried to work together to digitize it and try to fundraise to translate it into Bahasa and then into English. It was so hard to find any sponsor who has this, who was willing to sponsor for the translation. But we didn't manage to get the thesis translated, but we did have a translation project. It was actually like co-supported by Asia Art Archive to translate some of Sanento's writings in the journals and catalogs of Gerakan Seni Rupa Baru, 1976. And it was actually like, and we made it accessible online, the translated documents. And I think that in a way, it contributes to at least like giving more access and visibility about the importance of Sanento. And then there were like, and it gives ways to inclusion of him whenever people talk about like the development of Indonesian contemporary art. But it is indeed true. Language itself is also. I find your question is very important. Sometimes people think about digitizing. It's more about like digitizing for example, like the artworks, but actually like in Southeast Asian context, language is one thing, like the first barrier in terms of, like the construction of knowledge and also history in the art historiography. So it's an endless project, and I think it's one actually like in terms of visibility. It's also like the first thing when we talk about digital platforms. It's how to create visibility is the metadata first that somehow gives ways to the accessibility and visibility of these important thoughts. So to the extent that that's what I can share about like the experience of trying to include Sanento in the historiography through digital projects. Yeah.
Thank you, Farah. That was really very. For those of you who don't know Sanento, he was quite seminal, and I think picking up from that, I want to touch on the idea of even if you have it translated and then digitized and access is given into a language that is more accessible, I want to address this question to some of our speakers in the room, and that is, do you think there is a difference, and what is that difference? Particularly for Ajahn Gomesh and also Gardika in succession, about how we hear things or apprehend experience culturally. So in Ajahn Gomesh's case, perhaps, the traditions of like the yantra, other kinds of like Buddhist traditions, and like bliss, for example, in sentient being. And then later on, I would like Gardika to make a comment about the actual visceral quality of cultural experiences. So maybe Ajahn Gomesh first.
Okay, let me go back to the answer from the first speaker. I think it's very interesting because language is something very fluid. And I can think of one thing that's very interesting, and it might sound a bit dirty, but please bear with me. For example, in the ancient time, the time of Buddhists, we have this kind of thing that for being a monk, you have to use 4 things. For example, the first thing is you do not cook yourself. You have to basically ask food. For the clothes, you have to get the clothes from the dead people and then make it your own gown. And then for the third one, you do not have your own dwelling, but you have to stay underneath a tree. And the fourth one is particularly interesting. The fourth one said, you must not take any other medicine except the ones that are made out of, and there is no exact translation. But when it gets translated to other language, it becomes piss. So that's why translation is becoming a pivotal thing. Why would Buddha ask you to drink piss as medicine? Then to understand that context, you have to go back 2,568 years plus. That during that time, the medicine wasn't that advanced as today. And during that time, when you want to create some kind of medicinal herb, you would put it by using some kind of the herb plus some kind of liquid form. And for rich people, they would use the like a churned butter or honey. But being a Buddhist monk, meaning you are no longer having that privilege, one thing that you can use would be the excretion from animals. So they would divide this kind of thing from cow, from bunch of animals, but definitely not human piss. So this kind of translation, get lost in translation. So coming to your question, which was about the how do you say it again?
The rhythm about listening in different languages and whether that impacts the way we appreciate different cultures, especially since there are no direct translation or accurate translation.
Exactly. So her question answered itself. So basically, we need a context to go along with certain translation. So especially in the digital format, you can't just literally scan something, place it like what we have seen yesterday, the perfect dance by the something that cannot be replicated by motion capture, the nuances of the muscle movement or the muscle spasm. So that kind of thing, I think, is something that we need to take into consideration to take the picture as a whole and make it more meaningful and also human. Thank you so much.
So actually really to recommend live experience, a very live face-to-face experience, like all of us here. I'd like to invite Gardika to talk a little bit about that.
First, thank you, Dr. Bridget, Rachel, Cindy, and all of the NAFA team for this wonderful meeting. So, to answer Dr. Bridget's question, can we do a short simulation of listening? So, I will ask you to let us listen to our breath. I know it's a very small sounds, but let us connect our ear to our breath. You can close your eyes if you're comfortable, or if you want to open, it's okay too. And then I will add more and more parameter after that, but in a spontaneous way. So let's begin to listen first, ourselves first. And now let's listen to other people beside you, behind you, or in front of you. Listen to their breath. Do they feel tired, or do they feel passionate, or contemplating? Let us think and interpret, trying. And now let us imagine that we can listen to our own heartbeat, which is probably no sound. Okay, thank you. So that's culture. Because culture is always an act to understanding our diversity, to understanding the other people point of view, the other people cultures, also in Southeast Asia. And then we can bring this practice to, for example, in Singapore, in this Bencoolen Street, and there is a masjid. With Zikri and Mas Alin, last night we talked in the front of the masjid, and it's a very small azan sound compared to Indonesia. Is very loud with the four direction, with direction of the toa, the sound speaker. It's usually it's very loud, and then it's very near from here. There is a Kwan Im temple when the people are throwing the bamboo, and we can listen to the sound. And then there is a stick, bamboo stick that drop, and you collect. And what is my prayer today? And then just maybe 15 meters beside that is the temple of the Hindu temple. And then after that, we go to the shopping mall, the Bugis Junction. You hear people chatting, and then maybe somebody is shouting because she cannot solve the work by the phone. And this act of listening in a daily life is actually our culture. So the act of listening that we can bring a new consciousness, we will realize that our soundscape, our daily sound in Southeast Asia is really embedded to the cultures. It's also the same with the sculptures, with the painting, because with Pak Garin Nugroho, the mix, the nasi campur is really our spirit. So that's also happening in sounds in around us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gardika. Okay, so I think just trying to take up from that, what you were highlighting to us would be something more specific, like even the very basic, foundational, visceral sort of reactions and actions and reactions are what constitute the level of interpretation for different cultures. Those are experiences that only we can appreciate, only we can access, that no one else can access. Yeah? I do want to say, when I'm in Jogja and then the prayer call comes, it's actually a very beautiful sound, and it's 5 times a day, ladies and gentlemen. In Singapore, it's no longer allowed, but it's a totally different landscape. So, on that note, I want to invite Zikri to make a comment, because you are a man of many talents. Zikri is, how do I describe you? Someone who does podcasting, who does community work. You are a cultural activist, I think was the framework that we read you in. Maybe make a comment about diversity and how when you bring together such diversity, as we're hearing here, whether there is a leverage. Do you need to control the chaos, or what is it that you see, and how is it that you translate that for those of us to access or to experience?
Yeah, thank you so much, Bridget, and fellow panelists, and to all participants for the talk today. Yeah, I think it's a very huge questions over there. How can I actually try to envision or try to understand diversity through the practices that we are doing? And just maybe to resonate, so try to expand from what Gardika has been saying earlier. I think, you know, when we talk about how silence or how loud sound can be in a certain public spaces, is also, to a certain extent, it's a question of who owns a public space or who actually govern such spaces, and who actually, because for example, maybe in Malaysia, it's under, if you're using the public space in Malaysia, it's usually under the Perhimpunan Akta Aman, so it's like under the Peaceful Assembly Act. So you must, within a certain space, you must position yourself within the boundaries. So you cannot really act outside of the boundaries. And I would love to actually draw into my own practices of looking or try to historicize protest movements in Malaysia, because that's what I'm currently been doing. I'm looking at 15 years of protests, oral history of protest movements in Malaysia. And one of the way that may be related to our talk today is how culture, in a way, can help to project or envision a different intervention during protest movement, for example. And that's related to diversity. What I mean by this is like, there's a lot of ways on how people can participate in public spaces. Because I think most of us, like, either we actually practice within a white gallery setting, but most of us actually working outside as well. So it's a question of how can we navigate those kind of nuances. That's one thing. But to the question of diversity is also a question of power relation. Who actually have the power to actually include those kind of conversation? How do you perceive certain things is diversity, when for some people it's a question of being assimilated to a dominant culture for a certain extent? So what sorts of discussion are we going to talk about? For example, maybe try to relate it back with the question of archive, right? I think most of us right now working with the archive that try to go beyond state. We know we try to build something from below, which is very interesting. For example, working with amateur archaeologists, you know, like what sorts of history can we derive from that kind of sources, which might be totally different from the way scientifically, empirically kind of approach, right? So, and even like Achan Gomesh, you did mention about how working in the transnational configuration of chimera, because it's a shared kind of mythology, but then now it seems that it has been encapsulated within different states, although it's supposed to be beyond that. It's translocal rather than transnational. So what sorts of diversity can we actually, you know, negotiate from here? Maybe I'll end with that first. Thank you.
Okay, so you're asking a question. Thank you, Zikri. That's a very nice segue, actually, to Debbie, because I think a lot of your work, well, I don't know, I hope I'm not overstepping by saying is, I think your work, the work that I've seen anyway, is about agency, creating agency. So we use this word, not a very fancy word, agency, when we want to talk about a level of empowerment, that whatever it is that you do has an impact. So let's talk a little bit about all of this different, influences, various, icons of power and diversity, and how one could affect, and history even, there's a weight of history with us, how one could impact or affect agency, through some kind of leverage, whatever it is you might suggest.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective as an artist, making games, but the games I want to make are, like you say, about the agency of the player, of people, on maybe making games that are also about the rules of games, where people don't always have, people are asking also, the whole, in your everyday life, you're told you have to do things a certain way, but and then when you're playing a game, a lot of times the game designer is telling you you have to do it a certain way. But, what if you choose not to? I guess the games I personally like, and I like to play, and also the artworks that I like also, are also things sometimes that play with that, that maybe even the tempo of playing, it doesn't have to be, to also go back to the rhythms and the sounds of a city, that is also about the slowness or having a walk, and that also has its own rhythm, being attentive to these sounds and the atmosphere and all these other things that make up the world, So it's also about having that space, to contemplate also how we want to behave, how we want to react to it, which, in a world of, a lot of, I guess games is in everything, in youth culture, everyone's playing different kinds of games that are telling people with a certain rule, you have to play and win a certain way, you have to win it. But what if you didn't have to also win, it was also about just you exploring, you understanding, making your own interpretation. Yeah, for me, also working as an educator, also thinking, when I want the students and the people I work with also, or people I collaborate with, to think about their own way of translating it, even to a, say, technological sort of medium. For me, it's more interesting that they also negotiate how they translate, like maybe from a drawing or a map, or a painting, and then they think, how would I translate this into a digital form, into a playable form, into a different form? So, it's also asking people how they would understand it and translate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie. I was just thinking about this when we designed the previous game for our board. Actually, when I was doing the UAT, I jumped where I shouldn't have jumped, and then I fell into a dark, large pit somewhere. And then we had to tell the game designer, we had to say, oh, that happened, what can we do? So actually, it's very much still a design. It's like a feeding back onto itself, that you tell them, this happens, that there's a rule that it shouldn't happen. What happens if I want to stay in the pit, for example? Sorry, leave you with that question. And then I just wanted to also share something from my childhood, which I think some of us may remember. It's called Choose Your Own Adventure. Have you heard of it? Have you, Debbie? Where you, there are pages in the book, and then you read it, and then you just pick which one you want to go. The protagonist has to decide something, and then they turn to which page when they've made that decision. I think these are some of the things that we're thinking about. Free play if you like. And so on that note, I want to actually invite Ajahn Gomesh to also make a comment about that, about play, about games, and what your experiences are when you are thinking about preoccupying an individual for a short period of time.
I see. I want to go back to her game first. Very interesting, because her game is almost like a free-to-play in terms of you have objects, and then you can categorize them according to your experience or past experience. It reminded me of a scene from a series, very famous series called The Severance. I'm not quite sure if any one of you have watched it. It's basically characters have to be placed in front of a computer, and their numbers, and their jobs is just to categorize into separate box. And then a character could come and ask, how do I categorize this? And then the supervisor would say, you just categorize it when you think it's right. Then you put that number in the right box. So in a way, each person has a different ways of interpreting. For example, the spoon. My son never used it for eating, but he would use it for digging sand at the beach. So I can see, if he see this, he would categorize it as toy. Something like that. So in a way, everything, going back to Dr. Bridget's question, which is about play, I think in a way we have to put it in all aspects of our life, because our life is, in fact, is very short, and we have to make it enjoyable. So every step of my daily life, I make it into play. For example, in the morning, I would have some kind of gamify myself. What can I do today to earn certain points for myself? So working has never been funnier or funner when I adopt this kind of mentality. When I started working with you guys, UOB and NAFA, I made sure that my goal is just to have fun. So every step, every comment, I'm sure that is for the better thing. So if you take things as play, you will also always enjoy it and always find room for, how do you say it, satisfaction. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes. Okay, so that's a very good sort of like point of departure, because we're talking a little bit about play, and it's a lot of this so-called experiences or how we make decisions is embodied in the human archive, meaning your own archive, meaning who you are, how you think. I want to come back to when we're not exactly playing. Zikri didn't exactly answer that question. In fact, he asked the question. And also to Farah, I want to invite Farah because with your experiences in doing Biennale, for instance, or larger projects that involve a more global players or global audience, how do you navigate if you like, the concept of play, given that if you came to like 2021, for example, we take Jakarta Biennale 2021, there have been other biennales from the past. Is there an expectation, going forward? Do you follow a certain pattern? Do you communicate a certain way? Who are the people that you want to talk to and showcase? Maybe share a bit of your experiences in navigating that. Yeah.
Thanks, Bridget. I would like to, I'll try, but I'm very interested, I'd like to connect it to Zikri. Zikri was saying something very important about what we do, like contemporary art practice, archive, is beyond the state. It's something that especially in the case of Indonesia, like it's always, we artists or we art workers, whether we do archive, we do big events, we do like Jakarta Biennale, for example, which I'm gonna share more a bit later in relation to the government or in relation to the state, yeah. But I mean, for example, like EVA itself is we call it Indonesian Visual Archive, which now we deactivate now because we're trying to rebrand, we try to do something that actually has to be done by the state, because the state in Indonesia case hardly accommodates us. Kalau di bahasa Indonesia, in bahasa we call it negara tidak hadir. The state is never there for us. The state is never there for civilians or for, let's say, free thinking or the art scene and art or freedom of expression like us, for example, like we call ourselves Indonesian Visual Archive, but we are actually we're not a public institution. We're a bunch of art professionals, and then we make this independent art archive, and then we try to, archive based on what we think has constituted our version of history in Indonesia. In a way, that's where we play. We play around, with our position as part of civil society, where actually we increasingly being conscious about that actually we are doing something that actually the state or the government has to, and we're helping them actually. We're helping them, but in a way that because we are independent, we have lots of freedom to, decide or take side on which practice of art that, think is representative enough of the development of the society or the development of the grassroots or the development of the movements, for example. as opposing to what the state, trying to define. So that's the play. And in contemporary, and for me, being an independent art professional, independent art worker in Indonesia, it's always about play. Yeah, in different scale and different meaning. While Jakarta Biennale is a very interesting case because it's actually a government program. It's in the Jakarta Art Center, and then it's an official government program since 1974. It's one of the oldest biennial event, historically, probably in Southeast Asia. But it evolved a lot amidst who was in charge. Paji was in charge in 1993. Ruang Rupa or Ade was like in charge during the, let's say, 2013, and then it always changed. Bhakti, and then I was in charge so it was then like the artists always try to claim and in a way play around with this notion of who owns this event, who owns the city as well. And that's how we negotiate with, or in this case, the city government of Jakarta in trying to, define or trying to maybe the agency of us as representative of the community or art as artists as part of changing society, something like that. I hope it answers your question, Bridget, but I was quite intrigued with what Zikri was saying because it resonates with what we are here in Indonesia, institution or not institution, have been. It's because we are always playing with what the state should have provided, but not. I think that.
Yeah, no. That's a very, very provocative answer. And I just want to kind of distill it a little bit to bring us back into the room in that you're also making a kind of an observation that for every action that you do with the kind of agency that we have from any particular period in time with all the various actors, that is a form of archive as well. That's a form of documentation as to who is taking that action, what it means for them in that specific time and space, and making a declaration about that. So I think that that's such a very provocative but a very important observation to make. And on that note, I want to invite Zikri, who has enthralled us all now with the curiosity of answering this question you haven't answered earlier.
In playing, right? I think, yeah, of course, everyone has been saying about how video games, I think it's a very interesting platform on how we prefiguratively position ourselves in the society. Because when we play certain, like Roblox, for example, it's very open. You are the one who actually giving the meanings to certain games and whatnot, right? And it doesn't really restrict us. So when we can actually envision something, we are almost there to a certain extent. It's like, how to say, if you're looking at the shadow right now, right? It's like, of course we cannot catch it. But then once we move it further and further, at least we are in the right direction. That's how I see, not playing directly, but then the way on how we position ourselves within society. But then again, just to get back to the question of playing, I think it's very human for us. If you I think we really have to go back to our childhood. Maybe that's when the last time we actually just play, even with just a stack of, I don't know, pepper and kick it all around. We don't really have any rules and regulation. So that's a very interesting take on how archive is supposed to be as well. Because right now it's very much being dominated by certain ways of classification. But then, maybe from the perspective of the artist, it's really about figurative. It's not just a side of physical side of repositories. It's ways on how we can actually embody certain knowledge, for example, and that's very much presence in all of our participants sharing earlier, right? So that's one thing. And just to come back to the question of play, I think maybe I would love to touch about my ongoing project as well on documentation of censorship. So as of now, I'm actually one of the research fellow for Arts Equator censorship documentation, focusing on 6 different countries in Southeast Asia. So we have like 900 different cases from 2010 until 2022, and then another years is coming, another 12 years. So it's in total it's 14 years of documentation. So we have like 900 different cases. So what I mean by looking at these particular cases, right? You can see how the artists actually playing around what can be said, what cannot be said. Whether they are aware of it or not is totally a different things altogether. But then being aware of the boundary actually help us to imagine what goes beyond. And that's how I think play can provide those kind of spaces to imagine what goes beyond that and try to invite more people to join in, maybe.
Okay, thank you. I want to extract something from there and then ask a very provocative question for everyone. And that is, with the use of archives or with the knowledge, you use the word Zikri, you use the word awareness of, let's say, for example, how to behave. What are the rules? What are the OB markers? And how that affects even our notion of play and a way of navigating. And now with the advent of AI, that dirty word that nobody wants to mention, well, certainly don't want to mention it, but I have mentioned it now, artificial intelligence and what is done, in the case of like deep machine learning, large language models and so on. Is there a moral obligation, I'd love to ask this question, when we're looking at having that knowledge, that awareness? So say, for example, I have a very interesting motto, do first, say sorry later. And I'm just saying, is there a moral obligation, you think, as an artist, when you are, or an art maker or an art worker, when you're using or when you are extrapolating from archives or sources other than what you already know or what belongs to you, is there a moral obligation when you're representing it, when you're interpreting it, when you're playing with it? So let's start with Ajahn Gomesh and then we'll go all the way down. Yeah.
Why the tough question and I'm the first one? Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Bridget. I think this is a very interesting question because actually I just had a keynote lecture on AI and also how us as a human being would survive as a sustainable creativity in the age of AI. So first thing when I do, for me first, when we do things as an artist and we refer to things in the past, we always have, how do you say that, like a concrete information. And always, as a researcher, I always document where and when I found it and when this kind of thing has happened. So
citation.
Yeah, exactly, citation. So that's one thing. So never forget where the original idea comes from, which is something that is very interesting about AI, because AI is something that, if I were to say it, it's basically hallucinating everything. It just happened to hallucinate it right or wrong. That's it. And most of the time it happened to hallucinate it according to what we like. So we enjoy it. But that is somewhat a pitfall, because most of the time nowadays, I have seen this numerous times, people would say, I have this question, I'm going to ask AI. And AI say this, and I would de facto believing it that this is true, which is very scary, because now we are living in the age where we are no longer needing to struggle to find true answer anymore, or having to find textbook. We just type in a few prompts, something came up, we just take it for granted. But the thing is, once it gets backfired, AI is not the one to be blamed, it's the person who posted it. So I would like to cautiously warn people that whenever you use AI, you have to use it responsibly. Basically, use it so that you can take responsibility for it. For whatever you said, AI have said something, can you actually take, responsibility for it or not? So, also I have seen the rise of the use of AI in academia, and several of them, have been retracted based on fake information, this and that. So in a way, the ethics comes into play, And the last week, I had a lecture for a PhD student from another university talking about if you were to use this technology too much, in the end, you are just weakening your own brain chemical. Because when you use it, you no longer play. If we come back to the concept of play, you are no longer play with your brain muscle. Rather, you use the computer to do all the exercises for you and come back, give it to you. So you no longer struggle to learn anything new. So, for example, the recent study from the MIT showed that they split students into 3 groups. This was a small set of people, about 50-something. One set is to write article without the use of any technology. The second one used Google to search for information. And the third one to use AI to help writing it. And they would use the EEG device to measure the brain activities. The one with a lot of brain activities would light up. And you can guess the one that is pretty much brain dead. So in a way, the action that we are doing to ourselves resonate, echo for eternity. Whatever we do, whatever we play, we collect it, just like experience and everything. So in a way, this is the ethic answer for me. Yeah. Thank you.
So the answer is yes. Thank you. Gardika?
This is my answer. Sorry. Yeah, it's a very heavy question because now I studied composition for years, and now Suno can create music for seconds. Suno AI, and it's can be whatever you want, and you can be the prompt composer as you like, and it's like an unlimited possibility because the data, whatever music that appear on the internet become their source of data to generate new music. But then when I was record the soundscape across Southeast Asia and Japan for the Japan Foundation Fellowship, I was right on my project introduction that this is how I hope that we can understand each other in this diverse region, how we can sense reality through sound, the reality of our community, of our diversity. But then again, what is the reality? That we have different senses of reality. Even when we listen to other people breathing, we start to interpret because there is no word of explanation. Is she tired, or is she just trying to contemplate this interpretation? And then with AI, I must admit that several months ago, I was quite feel defeated. Defeated. Because there is a workshop about how to use Suno. So then you become a composer for a second. Wow, I studied this for years. And now look what happened. And then, but what is the important thing is, I think now, can sound very cliche, but how can we add meaning and reflection to what we are doing when the technology gives the illusion of, if we can feel this as a music now, what is the music of our era? It's jumble of everything, of every tempo, of every fast pace, slow pace, and every multi-layer instrumentation that probably makes us drunk of this reality. So can we step back and rethink what the future will be like? At the same time that we face also the climate that the earth is not the same anymore, and it's dangerous. We only have one earth. This is our home, our common home that we must share to each other, and the reality is not that good. So in this time was very, very strange time with this technology also. So I just wondering, but is this true? Maybe not, but at least I still have faith that the sense of places, the sense of community, that you cannot generate the sense of community, can you? Can you generate the soundscape of the community when they share their daily life? And the meaning upon the meaning is when we listen to our mother singing to us, or our daughter crying, that's the most beautiful sound on earth, because we have that meaning. Because we have this deep connection, the deep emotion that we don't need any explanation of that kind of energy that make us human. So I hope when we confuse that we can refer back to when I put my daughter to the daycare, and then I go back to take her at night, like 6 or 7 p.m. And then she said that, "Papa." Oh, that's enough for me. It makes my day already. So that's the sound that I really like. I love so much. So that's evoke, and that's really inspired me to still have. This is very personal, but still have a room of optimism about me as a human in this time. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Gardika. So basically, those things that we can't replicate as humans will not be manipulated, or will not be at the mercy of manipulation. So before Debbie speaks, sorry, Ajahn Gomesh wants to make a comment.
I think I resonated with him because I used to do a lot of painting, sculpture, this and that, and AI can do it in an instant, 3 seconds, 30 seconds, come out. But something that AI cannot replace us is actually the journey itself. I think that's something that AI has taken away the joy of making things. Something that, even though with the AI, I would still doing my own sculpting. Although I know for the fact that AI can create the artwork within seconds, but I still do enjoy the process of doing things. And I can remember exactly what moment I created that edge. I remember exactly how I painted it, because that is something that AI cannot take away from human soul.
Thank you, Ajahn Gomesh. Debbie?
Thank you.
Moral, come back to moral.
Yeah,
Moral
the moral
obligation.
obligation. And thank you for your sharing as well. I mean, I also have the same feeling also as Dr. Gomesh, and also when you talked about also the community or that personal human connection. So I guess as an artist who's worked a lot of tech, I sometimes find myself, in the past, I've found myself in the position where maybe the work I'm making that involves the use of a technology is maybe even next to a tech demo or something. But, I'm not doing tech demos, and I think the space of art is also to ask questions, even like inconvenient questions, or even, show maybe that the tech doesn't have to be, there's a right way to use it, and in art you can ask a lot more. You can open up that question. There can even be a room to ask what are the misunderstandings people have about technology like AI. What things do they really understand? Actually, do they know what they're doing even? So, it's also a space for that dialogue about those questions about it. That I feel as an artist, that also as artists, we also bring people to speak about it, and then also have that understanding through the dialogue with everyone. That's something also that maybe is hard to do in other spaces, but art can do it, yeah.
So I think what I'm getting from that is no, but that's a very honest response. It's very authentic in that we create this space where we can actually ask questions, meaning morality is not an absolute, but that you question. If you ask questions and then you create a sense of self-awareness about it, is that
maybe to add to that, I always see what I'm doing maybe somewhere between art and also tech and games, but also, that this is also a role to be a bridge between these worlds. Even in like games, I think my interest in games is also because a lot of it is so considered on the outside quite lowbrow, or maybe even vernacular, like there's a lot of amateur, like she was sharing on the video, on her research also on these amateur medias. That's really interesting because people are taking all these platforms, all these means of making and producing lots of creative material, and this material is really interesting, and some of it can go really far, and it's really useful for us to understand culture and society as a whole. A lot of it can be extracted from it, though you might say, oh, it's amateur, or gaming is so lowbrow, you see a certain stereotype, but these also are really the voice of people, and through all these mediums, that's what also excites me, I guess, about all these different voices also.
And it's like a low barrier kind of activity to really get to the authentic experience. Yeah, I want to give Zikri the last word, so I want to invite Farah to talk about, use these few minutes, to talk about this, about the moral obligation of using archival material or even accessing other people's experiences in the communal or the coming together to, like a committee, if you like, a committee to do something, or in the case of Eva, your actions and your choices. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, like in the case of Eva, it's why we archive in the first place is mainly for knowledge production. So what we concern more is not really like, I mean, like, for example, like it's a bit different approach with when I was at NGS, for example, like the archive building is used more for, let's say, curatorial research in terms of, especially like, for example, acquisition research, which is very useful sense for the collection department. So things like provenance, authenticity, like it's something a historical relation to the historical importance for things like that. But at EVA, it's always kind of like very much a guerrilla kind of archive, and it's artist driven as well, community driven, and in a way that we don't even think about copyright, and we don't have money to, like for royalty or anything. But the most important thing is about preserving the knowledge, because like Indonesian art history or Indonesian art scene, somehow it's the knowledge construction is still very much and the history itself is very young. It's still young in a way, and there's a lot of plot holes. There's a lot of plot holes. For example, like we sometimes, like there's a taking side. There's a there's a lot of like perspective, like the curatorial perspective is more about filling the holes. And in a way, we are in some ways that we are more. It is more exciting to work holes. Like trying to, for example, like the discovery of how, let's say, for 1965, and artists' relation of the 1965 tragedy, or art practice that relates to grassroots movements, which is not in the canon at all. Which is not in the canon at all. They are in the historiography, they are holes. So it's the moral obligation becomes like blend in with the need to fill in those holes. About how art means to society. It's always about sharing this knowledge. I talk about the metadata before, and actually in relation to AI, actually, like I'm more interested in how AI consume data, or how AI, probably with the help of how algorithm also construct, also really powerful nowadays to construct our knowledge. Like, for example, like if you really rely on the internet and try to find like really obscure parts of history, let's say for Indonesian society, Indonesian social history, or even art history, probably it lasts until, like, let's say from in the 90s, that you can find a wealth of information. Like everything there is not like into metadata yet. That's why I find a question about Samento is really interesting. It's really intriguing and important. So what I mean is that I think that maybe we should feed the AI more with all these obscure or marginalized knowledge. So the AI doesn't only consume by the mainstream populistic knowledge, that information and of what's the world today. So I'm more concerned with that, on how on about the knowledge production, the knowledge distribution, and how actually like this AI thing consume that and construct a new knowledge for us, or maybe the next generation, and erase what has come before. Yeah, hopefully it answers.
Yes, no, that's just so characteristic of guerrilla, guerrilla fire. Yeah, feed the AI, and then before it feeds us the stuff that we don't want. Thank you, Farah. So I want to ask Zikri to now kind of like give your answer as a kind of a closing note.
Okay, not really closing, we can close together. Yeah, but of course it's very important questions. But then in order for us to answer this, there must be a critique towards the techno-feudalism that we are in right now. There must be an anti-capitalist dimension to it, because at the end we actually have to ask who actually owns the data, and what actually the ecological destruction that are affected by this. Because, for example, there's a lot of data center, and actually it accumulates a lot of water needed to process it, right? So this is something that maybe we are here are not able to answer. So the critique must be done towards the big corporation that actually owns the data. And just to build on Farah's perspective on like populating marginalized anecdotes or perspective to AI, it's very interesting, because if there's anyone use X or Twitter, I think earlier last year, actually Elon Musk, he actually put a community notes, to counter fake news and everything. But what happened is that, like maybe a couple of months ago, he actually decided, okay, we have to pull off the community notes section, because we know what happened. X or Twitter has been a very interesting right-wing platform nowadays. So we can see where it goes, because if we're going to like populate the social media platform to non-right-wing's perspective, but then again, if we didn't really go straight to the jugglers, yeah, which is the big corporation, then it might have a different turn as well. That's, I think, the way that we have to go. But then again, maybe just to relate it back with the ideas of how can we actually provide an ethical contribution. Actually, it's interesting for me to relate with Mas Ali works, right? Because, the way that he do, about the camphor stories, about how the communities actually preserve the enclave of the camphor forest, that's something which is almost impossible to be incorporated to the knowledge system that we are in. Whether AI able or not, maybe, just the surface, but then the relational, the subjectivity of the people there might not be able to be captured in those kind of relations. So that's something, maybe as an artist, as an archivist, that's the figurative sense, the emotion, the grief, the, something that might not be there. For example, with Buddhist work, right, about the terminologies or language that is being lost. So that's something maybe AI cannot really capture how we are doing, how are we utilizing it for everyday life. Maybe that's how I'm going to like frame the questions. Yeah, thank you.
So you think that that's the ethical dimension to it, that we continue to document it and acknowledge that we are the archivists in Mas Alin's case. But how would we share that knowledge?
I think, of course, not every knowledge should be in the system. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, say it some more.
Because, for example, if you are working with the community at risk, their everyday life really depends on the knowledge that they derive from their. For example, if you're looking with the stateless community, every day they are facing persecution. They might be detained, by the police. You are not allowed to have any civil rights, for example. So those kind of knowledge maybe not should be in the dominant systems of knowledge. Yeah, so that's how I perceive it. But then if you're asking me the questions of how it should be disseminated, I don't really have any quick answer to it. But then maybe it's already somewhere there, Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's speculative. I know.
No, that's so important. Thank you for sharing that, Zikri. Ajahn Gomesh looked like he wanted to say something.
Okay. So I think very interesting thing about the knowledge that should not be shared. For example, would you have your kid able to ask AI how to create a bomb, which is a knowledge, certain knowledge? Of course not. So I think somehow archive, you have to have some kind of limitation as well. For me, I think that AI is a great, great tool, but it's just too early for adoption, for mass adoption, to say the least. Because I think it's more than just a Prometheus file. It's more of the Pandora's box, because it can do pretty much anything, everything in an instant. So it's very, very dangerous. So coming back to the archival thing, I think it's very important for especially you as a curator or the archivers, because to do an archive, that means we are deeming that certain subject is important at the present and archiving what have been done in the past up until present for the future people to look and to dig up to whatever or not. So it's up to all of us to see which knowledge should be or ethically sound to be passed on. And I'm sure that certain knowledge will be there, but maybe more restricted. But just for the sake of humanity, maybe some of the stuff should be placed in the proper place. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn Gomesh. We have about 7 minutes. Are there questions from the floor? Oh no. What would you like to ask, Sherman?
No, it's just perhaps it's like AI is actually a collective human knowledge in a way. Actually, the AI is actually already, and right now it exists like an archive. It is an archive. Yeah. So the AI, and whether there is a certain morality in the archive, like whether you said you want to have a bomb or not, but it's actually there. The entire knowledge that is in the AI is actually what has been put or contributed by humans around the globe. Yeah. So
what's the question?
So no, I mean it's more like a comment. It's like the AI should then not be seen as a threat, but more like a sourdough, like how you feed the AI. Then it becomes
Which is what Farah was talking about.
You're feeding the AI. So AI, at this point, I think my question is that when AI is able to create its own consciousness, that means the experiential part, and that is where we humans, I think that is a time that we begin to see the bigger shift. I think right now it's fast approaching that. Because right now AI is not able, what we have as a human consciousness, I think AI is not yet there, but once it reaches that point, then that is where we begin to see whether the AI can replace us as a species?
Okay, there wasn't really a question there, but you're talking about agentic AI, right? Agentic AI, which a lot of companies are spending a lot of time and money trying to develop, but a lot of the projects have also been cancelled because it's not possible to predict the results. So when you want to pump investment money into a particular type of technology, you want to know what the outcome is. And the irony about agentic AI is, and what you're talking about with consciousness, is actually something it's very difficult to predict. So, but thank you for that comment. Are there any other questions? Oh, Adrian. Vincent, you want to give him a mic? Sorry.
Hi, so thanks Farah as well for the presentation. I would like to kind of touch on EVA as well and kind of bring in ideas of Southeast Asia, because I think in terms of archives, there's a need to kind of understand our region in which there's a lot of ground-up archives or ground-up archiving as well, because there's so much ground-up activities, culture production, art production, sounds as well, everyday sounds that really needs to be archived from the ground up, and it should also become something that we do as a community as well. So I guess it's not really a question, but it's a provocation in how we should approach a conversation about archive and not bring in AI every time, because that's the end point. You kind of throw in information there and it becomes a new form of archive as well, like what Sherman mentioned. But I think specific to our region, it's really important for contemporary artists, for art historians, for curators as well, to kind of see how the archive can reach out to a newer audience. You know, these are concerns that we are interested in, where it may be activism in the 80s, 90s, but they're all in the past as well. And one very important thing I want to kind of raise as well is the importance of oral histories, the importance of oral archives as well, because you have artworks, you have curated shows, exhibitions, you have institutions with institutional memory as well, but it's also important to bring in social memory, and that's where archives becomes important, drawing back to our region, being very vernacular and very diverse, very archipelagic as well, but also being very rich in the various resources. So I really applaud Zikri for what you're doing with some of your writings. I kind of checked out your website as well, and how it's really cataloging writings about the archive and trying to historicize oral histories and to reach out to a newer generation of researchers and art historians as well. Thanks.
Okay, so more of a comment than a question. Thank you so much, Adrian. Applaud that idea about oral history. I rely a lot on that because I like listening and talking directly to the source, the origin source. But I want to come back to Zikri's point about the things that we archive and whether they should be archived or not. And I think it is a good note to end on as we're wrapping up this dialogue, because a lot of the times we subconsciously maybe document things which are not meant for posterity or for consumption, broad-based consumption. And to bring in the idea of AI, we have to bring in the idea of AI because AI is there and it's not going to go away. Once it's out there, you don't know what can be done or what is going to be done with it. So this is where I'm coming from. This is very personal and also professional perspective on this idea of moral obligation, to source, to citation, or to what you use with certain types of information. Of course, the context that you were raising is something that's totally different. It's the reality that most of us are not familiar with. But that applies as an analogy all across the board. Are there things that, yesterday Masrianto was talking about Melati. How does Melati inhabit the body? You can't document that. And why would you want to document that? And we now have about a minute, but I want to just end with this line. In a way, it's good that we don't know a lot of things. In a meeting with the universities earlier, we talked about going to the mountains, to go and discover things that we don't know anything about. And in a way, it's good that we don't know a lot of things because it gives us a long runway, to try and find our way and discover these new things. But also, I want to say, in terms of documentation or archives or a dearth of it, where it doesn't exist, then the statement or the observation would be, if it really matters, like Malati, for instance, if it really matters, you will find it. So with that, I want to thank all of you for your participation. It's the end of the dialogue session. I want to thank Farah. Farah, thank you for joining us online. Thank you, Farah. Zikri, Debbie, thank you so much. Gardika and Ajahn Gomesh. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.